Greetings, everyone, and welcome, a warm welcome to MCC's monthly webinar. We like to think of this as a behind-the-scenes look at MCC's work. And we have people joining us from across Canada and the US and maybe a few other places. We'll find out as the evening goes on. Many of you on Zoom, some of you on Facebook Live. So warm greetings to you all. And thank you for your ongoing support of MCC and for your interest in our work. We're just really thrilled that you're part of the MCC story, and also thrilled that we can offer you this unique view of the way we serve in the name of Christ. My name is Rick Kober-Bauman. I serve as Executive Director of MCC Canada, and I'll be your host today. And I'm here very close to the longitudinal center of Canada in the beautiful town of Winnipeg. So a few instructions. If you're on Zoom, you will be kept muted. We hope you will submit questions, though. You can do that through the Q&A function, which you'll find on that black toolbar at the bottom of your screen. And if you're coming in via Facebook, we also look for your questions through the comments section. And my friend Christy will be monitoring those and helping us hear from you and make this into hopefully a very good conversation. You can submit your questions anytime, but we'll give Cesar and Lizette a chance to present and then have the comments and questions near the end. We'll try to answer all of the questions if we can, but we think we have quite a few already that many of you sent in, so we might not get to them all. You're welcome to email them later and we'll try to respond as well. And of course, it is being recorded, and that will be made public after the live presentation. So today, resilience and hope in Latin America. So many of you have given generously to support MCC's efforts to bring relief, development, and peace. And we're very grateful. Thank you for reaching out to your neighbors you may have never met. Tonight, we hope you can meet some of them, that we can introduce you, at least in some small ways, through their stories and their photos. There have been lots of struggles in this region. Disasters, political unrest in Haiti, and climate change affecting farmers in Honduras. We want to recognize these challenges that people in these regions are facing, but we also want to show you stories of resilience, stories of hope. And we look forward to unpacking this over the next hour with our speakers. I've been really privileged to get to know Cesar Flores and Lizette Miranda, especially a few weeks ago when we were able to be together in Mexico. I was there for some partner visits, and then all of our representative staff from across Latin America was together for a week. So I'm going to give them a more fulsome introduction in a moment, and then they'll speak for about 10 minutes each, and then we'll have the remaining time for questions and conversation. Before I introduce Lizette and Cesar, I just want to reflect a little bit on my opportunity to be in southern Mexico, in Chiapas. And I've warned Cesar and Lizette that some of those experiences and memories, I think, might get woven into our conversation tonight, especially as we think about forced migration. People who, for a variety of reasons, have had to leave and begin to move through southern Mexico and beyond. We hear about this a lot. We hear about US-Mexico border issues, but I'm quite sure tonight we're going to get some deeper glimpses. And I was struck by being in Chiapas, and a place that's came to some notoriety 20 or 30 years ago when we heard first about the Zapatista movement, and seeing what it's like for indigenous communities to be in the midst of violence and drug-related gang warfare, at the same time as there are people from across the region moving through Chiapas and headed to northern Mexico to the US border. So I'm looking forward to seeing more deeply into issues in Central America and Haiti. So the more fulsome introduction that I promised. Lizette and Cesar have been co-area directors for MCC in Central America and Haiti since 2015. They've also served as country representatives for MCC in Bolivia and in El Salvador. Cesar and Lizette are living in San Pedro Sula in Honduras, and they're members of the Honduras Mennonite Church. Their children are now working and studying here in Winnipeg, in Canada. So I invite you, Cesar, Lizette, to bring your wisdom and your stories and images for our guests tonight. Welcome.
Thank you.
Can you see us?
I cannot, at least. I can hear you nicely, but I'm not seeing you yet. There we go. Perfect. Welcome.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you, Rick, for the introduction and for recently being in our region. As the theme today talks about the resilience and hope in LACA, we need to make clear that we're going to be especially talking about Central America and Haiti, because Latin America is from Mexico all the way down. But when we talk about resilience and hope, we're going to be presenting now, sharing our screen. We need to talk about those difficult trends that the continent has been going through in this past year. As Rick was mentioning, we were facing, as you all been facing, the COVID pandemic, that on top of the political unrest that different countries have been facing, like Haiti, Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Guatemala, plus the natural disasters. All of you that have been in LACA or know about LACA know that we are in a very vulnerable position for natural disasters, especially Central America and Haiti. Also, we need to mention about all the political unrest that we are being going through. So, LACA people have been resilient for hundreds of years. I mean, you see here in this picture by Adolfo Perez Esquivel, a well-known artist, human rights activist, and also one of the Nobel Peace Prize winner. This picture is called The Rivers of Hope. So that shows how LACA people have been being resilient through generations until now. So MCC has been part of that history. And in the last 60 years in different countries, MCC has been part of that. So these difficult situations also bring opportunities. And something that has been affecting the continent and is going to be affecting in the long term is due to all these situations is the job losses. It's been greatly. The loss of income in general due to the violence and insecurity. The increase of gender-based violence have been very critical. And also the decrease of access to food insecurity. And something that Rick just mentioned is that it's a factor who push people. In Latin America and especially Central America is a place where the migration is huge internally and also in different directions going to the south and to the north.
When we think about resilience, it's in communities, especially in people, is the capacity to withstand, adapt, and recover from adversity. Through our conversation today, we will be sharing some examples of peoples and communities that has been suffering, but also has been able to continue dreaming and hoping for a better future. Persione Roger is the lady in our left, and she's in front of her house that was destroyed for the earthquake in Haiti last August. 4 people shared the house with her in the municipality of San Jean de Sud. The earthquake affected more than 600,000 people, and they were in great need of assistance. 2,000 people, more than 2,000 people were confirmed dead or killed by the earthquake, and more than 12,000 were injured. We know that our partners, Aboredes, who is part of the Assembly of the Great Mennonite Church, help with the distribution of canned meat and relief buckets after the earthquake. And this gonna start a new food security project where Mr. Roger will be participating with another 150 families.
As Mrs. Royer was supported by a local partner, we see on the other picture, Mr. Eduardo Palma. He's from a community in Chamelecon, Honduras, and his community was flooded by the 2 hurricanes that hit Honduras, Nicaragua, and Guatemala last year, Eta and Iota. And so he, through the partner organization in Honduras, supported by MCC CAS, were able to receive relief buckets. But also with MCC support to the local Mennonite church, they were able to clean and to rebuild their places where they were living. But not only that, they were able to go through a lot of trauma healing, a lot of psychosocial support that was provided by the church with MCC support.
We know that we cannot do this by ourselves, and MCC has been responding to the different disaster to our local partners and churches, and through projects that focus on rebuilding home, food assistance, food production, and also providing the most needed trauma healing support for survivors. This support can make a contribution to the hope and the resilience of the people. Additional concerns of the natural disasters are the political unrest. They happen in Nicaragua, El Salvador, Haiti, and MCC representatives work closely monitoring with partners and local advisors the situation, the impact of work. And we know that sometimes we need to relays in our local to be able to understand the context and also be able to respond together better.
As you can see in this picture, there is a group of church members getting ready for a distribution in Nicaragua. The church has been playing a big role in the resilience and hope as people find ways to share what they have, but also what MCC provide to share in the name of Jesus Christ. So here is a brethren Christ people in Nicaragua ready to do a distribution, and also people in Haiti loading canned meat and also relief packets to share with people in need.
But as we accompany partners, we also listen and learn about some of the challenges that the people in the communities are facing. We know that, for example, for Haiti, this has been a very hard year. They have experienced the assassination of their president, Jovenel Moses. They also have the earthquake, and a couple days later after the earthquake, they were hit by a storm, which means that it was almost impossible to get the relief assistance that they needed right away. It has to spend a couple of weeks until MCC, in collaboration with our partners, were able to deliver the much needed food assistance. We have in this picture Susanelle Durset. She broke her leg 22 days before the earthquake, and she but she was in her crutches, and she was a participant of one of the first relief responses that we did. Something very interesting about her, she's a single mom. She has 2 kids. And in spite of she not being able to work, once she received the meat and also the bucket, she decided to share what she has with her neighbors. She shared half of her meat with others. And that is something very important to remember. Hope is carried through actions, and always hope comes from the people. That is something that Greta Thunberg say. One of the hope takes actions, and hope always comes from the people. And as you see, also hope have a replication effect. As we all serve, we can continue doing and targeting a difference in other people's life.
At this moment in Haiti, people have been really worried about the violence, and especially about the kidnapping that have been going through the years. More than 70, 80 people have been kidnapped. And lately, this group from North America that have been getting a lot of notice because the citizenship and also the random that have been asked. In the middle of that, Mrs. The Sources was sharing what she had. Other people are trying to accumulate this day because they don't know what is going to happen with them and the myth of all these situations that they're facing in Haiti. Those who have been in Latin America might know this saying, but it's well known, especially countryside. And this said, al mal tiempo, buena cara. To the bad situation, good attitude. Here in this picture, we see a smiley guy from the south part of the Honduras, Don Julio Cesar Corrales, an 88-year-old agriculture that have a wife and 7 children. And they live in a very dry area in the country, what we call the dry corridor that goes from El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, and Nicaragua. And in order to survive, Don Julio keeps planting. He have a hope that he will produce food for his family. So Don Julio planted at the beginning of the rainy season corn, beans, and even papayas. But with support of the partner, they were doing under the conservation agriculture methodology. But unfortunately, rain didn't come as every agriculture is expected, and he lost the first plantation. So the second time, he decided to plant, and Codeso, who is a brother in Christ partner in Honduras, decided to support again these producers. And thanks to God, rain came and he was able to produce, and he's showing proudly his corn. Like him, thousands of people in these countries are suffering because drought and the effect of the climate change. Codeso continues supporting these producers, even they're in a dry area. But with the agroecology and food security technologies, trying to make them to produce better. It's important to recognize that in these places, usually by this time of the year, MCC is doing food distribution. But this year, thanks to God, and thanks all the support that all of you have been providing to MCC and MCC passing to the partners, these producers will have corn and beans for the next year coming. As we and MCC keep working on climate change, we keep supporting and equipping vulnerable people through the support to the local partners. Partners are very key in this process of resilience and hope in Latin America.
There is an African proverb that say that if you want to go fast go alone, but if you want to go farther, you have to come with others. And that is something that within MCC and with our work, we believe that accompaniment is very important. In these pictures, there is one of the seed cohorts that was starting this year in Guatemala and El Salvador in February 2021. And we have 5 people from 5 different countries, and they are creating connection, learning from one another, sharing their gifts and talents. But through their accompaniment to the communities, they are learning and also making a contribution to the changes that can be able to happen because the commitment that the communities have for change. These young people are finding purpose, and as they are serving others, and they also want to remind ourselves that, you know, hopes take actions to serve, to share, to try again, like Don Julio, to share like Suselene, and also to serve like this group of young people who is serving now in Guatemala and El Salvador.
One way that resilience and hope happen in Latin America is through the support and exchange that MCC does with the Anabaptist churches. And here in this group is a representation of youth from different Mennonite churches in LACA serving in Guatemala and El Salvador. So that is a key important aspect. One from the Mennonite church in El Salvador, from the Mennonite church in Ecuador, from the Mennonite church in Guatemala, from the north and from Honduras churches, they are getting together to build that resilience that this continent needs. That doesn't have to come from necessarily from outside. We need that. We as an MCC are an outside organization, but involving local people also makes rich way to share that love of God for those who are in need.
MCC will continue working through partners and with partners in the communities, hoping that we will keep working to share God's love and compassion for all in the names of Christ by responding to the basic human needs and working for peace and justice. As we continue envisioning communities worldwide in a right relationship with God, with one another, and with creation. It is important for you as supporter of MCC to continue praying, and also you can be part of the hope and also of the resilience of the people, because we don't want to go by ourselves. We have to go. If we want to go farther, we have to go together. So we together with the communities, together with our supporters, but also together as MCC service workings from around the world.
So thank you for listening us, and we be willing to jump into the questions in order to address those that are possible. And thank you, Rick, for being with us in Latin America rep meeting after the pandemic. It was a refreshing time to be together and to worship together and to talk about how we can do better at MCC, accompanying a continent that has been going through a lot of issues, but with the God presence and the God love, we can just even contribute to that resilience.
Hey, thank you, Lizette. Thank you, Cesar. That was very rich. And as you were talking about our gathering there in Mexico, one of my fond memories is being around the fire with those guitars and shining our cell phone lights on the music papers so we could all see the words, and kids and adults singing together. That was a really rich evening. Good memories. Hey, and you've sparked a lot of thoughts here. There are questions coming in. I have a couple of observations. Like I was really struck when you were introducing the 5 members of SEED, and talking about how they, I think you said they come from 5 different countries. And I think many of us who've been with MCC for a long time tend to think about volunteers leaving Canada or leaving the US and going into settings in the 2/3 world and overseas, we sometimes say. But it's striking how much that has changed in MCC, and there's much more south to south exchange. And I just noted that, and I wondered if you wanted to say more about, you also talked about partners, how MCC works through partners, not MCC projects. But I would just welcome you to say a little bit more about how you've observed that change, because you've been with MCC a little while too, and have watched some of that. What thoughts would you have on how that's changed?
I think from my personal experience as a very young woman, getting inspired, but also not only inspired by the testimony of MCCers and people around me, but also finding my own strengths, and also that I can make a difference. And that is something very important. Like, for example, if every one of us is able to do what they can do, it's like Susanelli. She has those kind of meat, and she just took it and give it to others. I might not have the meat, but I have other skills that I can offer. So I think as we continue strengthening and finding or work in the ways that we can make a difference and contribution with our gift and knowledge, I think that is something that we keep saying, like people responding to the call.
I would add that in these past 100 years, MCC has been boosting people in doing a lot of capacity building. So can we say that now we are just bearing the fruits of that? Providing capacity means just to put people in a position that they can be able to share what they have. And so MCC has been doing that through these 100 years. And now people from all over are being sharing their gifts. Churches through the Yamen program, exchanging and learning from each other. I think that is a gift and something that MCC has been willing to do and is willing to do. And in the next 100 years, even more will happen.
Well, you two are inspiring leaders and examples of this. So thank you for reflecting personally on that too. Hey, let's go to some of these questions. No surprise, there are a few about Haiti. And I know you are paying very close attention to Haiti. So maybe I'll merge a couple. People are saying, what about the kidnapping? What about the gang activity? How is that affecting MCC and our partners and our staff and our work there?
We need to mention that Haiti is in a particular country with a lot of challenges, since they were the first country in the world who just free from slavery. So, and then continuing disasters, occupations, and so until now, Haiti, historians say, are paying the bill for what they did. Say that, we need to recognize that we have been as MCC passing a lot of difficult moments in Haiti during the coup d'etat long time ago, during the dictatorship. And 3 years ago in 2018, we had to remove our team from Haiti to Nicaragua because the political unrest and lack of food. And at this time, also Haiti has been going through a difficult situation with the killing of the president and the kidnappings that have been going all over the year. Since the beginning of the year, we've been monitoring that, trying to make sure that our staff follow what we put as protocols, and relying on the social capital that MCC built in each place. That is the local communities, host families, the local church, the local advisory committee, and our partners. So those resources keep us safe. That doesn't mean that nothing can happen to us. We need to put benchmarks, how we're gonna act in case of situation happen. Unfortunately, the last kidnapping of the 17 US and North American happened. That has been in the news and is very attentive for other groups to keep doing that. So we are not also the exception there that something can happen to us. We are just monitoring closely with advisory committee, with partner, with the rep, the situation, and see how we can make sure that our staff is safe. And we keep praying for those who are already in that situation, for their families, for the church, and looking for a better day for Haiti, because that is a situation that all us have been just taken by surprise.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you putting that in context, because it's very easy for us to think that this just started. As serious as it was with the 17 people, the context you describe is helpful. And I like the way you talk about how you gain a measure of safety and security through the social engagement that you have within Haiti, that becomes part of your sense of security there. We've got quite a few climate change questions too. Are you okay if we pick up a few of those? One person has just said, what do you feel is the most pressing need among many that's being that's coming to bear on families and communities? Yeah, what is the most pressing need among the many coming from climate change?
One of the things that we know and it's happening is the lack of water. I think that's something that MCC has been working for many, many years. For example, in Haiti, we have a big program in reforestation and working through getting more water catchment that can ensure like people will have access to water during the dry season. But also we know that it is very, with the weather, kind of weather that we have is very unpredictable. As Cesar was mentioned in the area of Choluteca, we have like 2 years ago, we were doing a drought response, and 3 months later, we were doing a big, has been water issues.
It was a big flood, and we were responding for that.
So as you see, so water can be like a blessing, but also can be a curse. So we continue monitoring and seeing how we can be able to secure water and also make different decisions regarding agriculture, supporting projects that will ensure food for the families and the people in the communities.
So food insecurity is an issue because people here in Central America and Haiti, I mean, you can survive under a tree, but not without food. So when you have a family of 6, 5, 10, that you have to bring food, that creates a problem. So that's push people out of the community, out of the country, and that creates another emergency. That is people in the way to wherever they think that is safe to go and get food.
You know, someone used an expression recently that said, MCC is not a group of climate scientists, but we have relationships with people all over the world who are being impacted by climate change. And is there debate there? Or, I mean, sometimes we get stuck in the debate about the impacts, but my sense is that you see it, our partners live it. What comments would you have for us listening tonight about how it is that partners drive MCC's response to climate change.
Starting with the debate has been there always, that we as an MCC act more from our hearts and based on the budget that we have, the need, and not based necessarily on the scientific part. When I'm saying that, it's talking about water. For example, we had a water conference in Mexico 10 years ago, and one of the scholars from one of the universities, he saw our project and he said, guys, you work your project based on the budget. We said, sure, depending how many dollars we have and how many people want to support. But he said, but you need to base that on scientific data, how much rain you get, how much water people need. So since that, we've been talking about that, and our PLDR people always keep it us straight, how much water we need for each person and family and during the time. So that's something that many of our partners are very specialized in that they connect with other networks to follow the patterns and to scientifically check that how those climate change effects are just causing damage on the soil because erosion, how those emissions are causing problems in other places, and we are suffering in this country the causes. The water, I mean, the deforestation, that's now they're measuring, I mean, how much water can run and has been for years in a field that doesn't have any cover, in a place that has cover. So we need to keep working closely with science and also with our heart that we want to help people to have a better life and have some food, but at the same time, make sure that the data is there to not to keep damaging, and with our efforts, what we are trying to come across.
Thank you. You put that better than my question. I just want to remind people that we are eager to have your questions coming in. Thank you for those who have sent them via Zoom or Facebook. Keep them coming. And I'll also remind you that my colleagues are putting up in the chat a number of links to stories that relate to what Cesar and Lizette are talking about tonight. You know, whether the Haiti earthquake or harvesting water in Bolivia. I found it interesting, Lizette, that you talked about, you know, dealing with drought and 4 months later dealing with floods, and recognizing that this erratic changes in weather patterns, that's part of the reality. So I know there was also a question earlier about COVID. Cesar, I think you mentioned it a little bit in the presentation. Is there anything else you want to say about how the pandemic has had kind of daily life impact on people, say in Haiti or other parts of Central America?
Yes, one of the things that we have like at first experience is the loss of jobs and opportunities for people to make a living. In some of the countries in Central America, I won't say all, like for example, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala have an extended lockdown. So one of the impact of COVID was job losses for them. For many of the people lost their job, those who have a formal job, but especially those who have jobs, people selling in the street. There's the one that they sell the bread, the one who sell the tortillas, they could not sell because was no people in the street. So that was one of the impact of COVID. And it was the health crisis because hospitals didn't have the capacity to respond to the need. And I think that has been one of the issues that we have, the same as access to vaccine. For a very long time in Honduras, Guatemala, and many of the Central American countries, we didn't have access to vaccine. Thanks God, in the last couple months, we has been starting and getting to a place when we are more comfortable and people is getting the vaccine. So that is very important for that. But also, one of the things for resilience, one of the pillars of resilience is the capacity to adapt. And I think Central Americans and our partners are very creative, and we has been adapting from jumping into the media space, for example. That has been one way that people has been adapting to how to do church, accompany communities. Another way that we adapt it is because we work with local partners in the communities. I mean, they were able to continue doing their job even when MCCers could probably not reach them as we will wish to do. So I think the impact from COVID is still very vivid in our context. And I think it will take years to recuperate both job and also some of the issues with gender-based violence that has been escaping, and also mental health, because stress, trauma, lack of job have really pushed people to the limit, and not always has been a service that has been provided for the people who need it the most. In a recent studies, they say that the numbers of mental health issues in Latin America and around the world have spiked. And that is something that as MCC, we will have to also keep a close watch.
One of the projects that we are launching in Haiti in response to the earthquake had to do with psychological support, especially to women and girls who have been affected by the trend of issues, but also in the firm land of here in Central America. I mean, a lot of work has been done through churches in the area of psychological support, because there has been a lot of damage in that regard. Nevertheless, the church has been able to continue accompanying, praising Lord, worshiping in a distance. So I think in this time have been preaching more long distance into another country, attending other services in other countries from people that we love and we have been worshiping through the years in different places, and that has been also a big advantage.
Well, a lot of the things you described, you know, we had impacts like that here too, especially as you talked about, you know, gender-based violence and mental health crises. We hear that a lot here in Canada as well, that those things have been worsened and exacerbated by the pandemic. And then what difference has that made in terms of how MCC responds? I mean, we've had lots of, you know, water and sanitation responses to COVID, the ones that seem kind of obvious. What about around trauma and mental health? And, you know, how has that shaped MCC's response? You know, I appreciated, Lizette, your comments about resilience, that yes, communities have been hit and hit hard, and yet they're adaptive and they're resilient. How has that shaped or maybe changed the way MCC works with partners?
Mm-hmm. Well, one way has been, like, as I was mentioning, for example, one of the way has been because we are working with local partners, they has been able to visit the people more often, of course, making sure that like they are taking precautions and like wearing masks, washing hands, and trying to see what some of the needs that people are experiencing. With, for example, some of the women's group, being able to train them in what mean the impact of stress and trauma in their bodies, how like all the things that are experienced are normal for an abnormal situation. So in actually giving them words to name, like I'm experiencing anxiety, what that means and the impact that's having, all the stress that I'm living now with, what's the impact that it have in my body. So I think we have opportunities to name the fears and also the losses that we have experienced, being able to speak of some of those things that has become really challenging. For example, last night I was talking with one of our church members. She lost her husband during COVID time. And one of the things that she said to me, one of the things that I'm mourning the loss of my husband is because I have to mourn him for a long time by myself. But once the women in the church start having like a Zoom women's gathering, and as they start talking about what grief means and how that you deal with that, I think those spaces for women provide very significant spaces for healing.
She and somebody else from the church mentioned, thank you to MCC who allowed us to jump into the Zoom to have this kind of gatherings that are usually happen in person, but now it's not possible. Partners have been meeting in smaller groups in outside places, being so creative in order to try to keep the distance, because I mean, as we mentioned, COVID has been very traumatic here, and our partners are committed to work well in that regard and not to just spread around the virus.
You know, there's a few questions coming in too about something else we haven't talked a lot about yet. Thank you for those reflections around pandemic. Forced migration, a movement of people across your region. Again, in my introduction, I talked about how we tend to see that through the lenses of sort of the US-Mexico border takes a lot of priority there. I might have mentioned this story to you, Cesar, when we were together after I had been in Chiapas and in San Cristobal. We met a woman from Honduras who had been traveling with her 2 children, and she was in a shelter there, taking a break. She talked about the issues that had just made it impossible for her to stay in Honduras. It was violence, gang violence. But it was one tiny little story, even though she had intersected with people who were moving for many different reasons. But what would you have to share tonight that would maybe help us get a deeper or a more fulsome picture of why it is that so many people are moving, and you know, we in MCC now we talk about the choice that you should be able to migrate well or stay well. And I think that's been really helpful for me to think about how we approach people's decisions and what it is that's forcing them to consider leaving or to make the decision to stay well or leave well. How does MCC fit in that mix?
Well, for LACA, migration is one of the priorities things that we address in different ways. I mean, because we deal with people who want to stay, because they have the right to stay. Everybody wants to stay under their own mind, if that's possible. Migration has been happening the whole history, but there are momentum that there are factors who push people out of their place. And we just been mentioning many of those: climate change, the COVID pandemic, the violence, the political unrest, what kind of the violence that happened in the region. Those are factors who push people out for looking for a better place to feed their family, for security, for mental health. So when we talk about those elements, we need to talk about that our MCC usually is working with the root causes of that. I mean, how to support people if they want to stay, to have a way to make a life, better water systems to irrigation or to drink, food production, communities who live in better situation, relationship, no violent situations where people feel here that they're count and they're part of the community. So when those things are not met, because we as MCC are just among the NGOs, one of the smallest ones. So we cannot cover the whole place, the whole country in given place. And so many people cannot cope that, even people who work in our project that we support, sometimes they leave and they're looking usually Europe or North America, or if you are in Nicaragua, they go to Costa Rica in different places, different directions, but are looking for places who provide security, provide health, education, and of course, provide a good mental health environment. So this part of the continent is the way to North America, and you will see in the last year, we've been seeing a lot of people from Haiti who left Haiti not this past year, 3 or 4 years, and they went to South America, to Brazil, Chile, Peru, and now they've been walking north and finally got it here. So with the new policy of the United States that they need to ask for asylum right here in Honduras and Guatemala or Mexico, in a country that doesn't have ways to offer to their own citizens well-being in the all different areas, it's hard to offer for those who are coming and looking for a better life. So we have seen this last month, Haitians, Cubans, African people just trying to cross to the north. Right now, there is a caravan going in Mexico, and it's not much in the news about that anymore, but they are being beaten by the police, trying to be stopped. But people always want to stay in their place if there is means to make a life. But when there is no, people will look for a place that they can save their life. When we just revise how we move as MCC, we need to think that MCC through the years have been supporting migration in different ways. Many of our families were migrants, and somebody helped us somewhere. I'm counting myself that my grandpa was a migrant from another country into this country. And many of your relatives were migrants too. Escaping from war, from food insecurity, and the same is happening at this point in this continent.
Mhm, mhm.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you want a question about learning tours? Someone is saying, and maybe you should say a bit, what are learning tours? Maybe not everyone on the call might know that, but say a bit about what they are and why we haven't been doing them for a while, and what thoughts do you have about possibly starting again?
Yeah, learning tours are opportunities for people from the north to connect with people in the south. It's an exchange and also getting to understand the context better. And they often are run from 7 to 15 days. And over the last 2 years, we haven't been able to do learning tours, especially because the pandemic and all the travel restrictions. I think we are now anticipating probably in the first part of the next year, as we were mentioning, the access to vaccine is something that we want to make sure that people have, because as a different than in the north, in the south, it continue to be very, very much limited, and we want to make sure like our partners and communities are not put in dangers. It is as a way also to protect our partners, and because the access to healthcare is very limited. So we will make decision probably for the fall or even 2023 when we're going to start.
If you want to touch the realities, join to a learning tour. And our partners, community that we are being working, they share in person directly what they're going through and how they've been impacted by the support of MCC, and how also they see that humanity need a new way to see life, and we need those kind of exchanges and learnings, because it's only when you just leave from your comfort zone that you can realize how God can work and is working through the difficulties, but at the same time building resilience in those human beings created at His image.
Wow. Those are good closing words, I think, Cesar. I don't think we can do better than that. And it is close to the top of the hour here. I want to say a very warm thank you, well, certainly to all the people who joined us from across several countries tonight, and especially to you, Lizette, Miranda, and Cesar Flores, for your ongoing leadership there, and tonight for giving us some glimpses. And for almost all of the questions, you came back to resilience. There was usually an example. One of my favorite ones was, what was the name of your Haitian friend who shared her canned meat?
Susanne.
Susanne. Yeah, that was a great story of, yeah, taking the modest resources that we have and multiplying them with generosity and resilience. So thank you for the way you're giving leadership and letting us get some glimpses into that. I want to make a few comments too about other ways that people can participate in the future. Some of you might know about MCC's podcast called Relief, Development, and Podcast. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. And in this month's episode, we're going to be looking at food security in India and how that's being addressed through our partners working with rural farmers there. As I said earlier, tonight's webinar will be has been recorded and will be available online and sent to you. And feel free to share it with someone you think might be interested in how MCC is working in Latin America and in the Caribbean. So we're really glad you joined us tonight. Thank you for being interested in and engaged with MCC's story, sharing relief, development, and peace in the name of Christ. And again, Lizette, Cesar, I hope you can go with our prayers and feel encouraged in your work there, knowing that there are many who surround you, and pass our greetings to your colleagues and to MCC's partners. Thank you, and blessings on the rest of your day.